The number of mitochondria in your cells varies from anywhere from 200 to about 2,000 in your muscle cells and up to as much as 8,000 per heart cell. We tend to lose mitochondria as we get older, and these tiny power plants are increasingly being seen by researchers as being related to the aging process and aging-related diseases. So what can you do if you want to maintain the health and function of your mitochondria and even make more of them? I have scoured over the research, and these ways have the best proof. Number one is resistance exercise training. In this study, which involved 40 older men and women who undertook a 3-day-a-week exercise strength training program that lasted 6 months, strength training resulted in a 31% increase in mitochondrial volume in their muscle fibers. In other words, strength training actually increased the amount of mitochondria in the muscle cells. And it gets even better because those mitochondria were able to pump out energy 57% faster after strength training. Moving on, they tell us in the title of this study that strength training actually reverses aging in muscle tissue. 25 healthy older and younger people began a 6-month-long strength training program. Results showed that before strength training, the older adults' muscles showed weaker, impaired mitochondria at the gene expression level. In other words, the genes associated with mitochondrial energy production were actually turned down, much like if you were to use a dimmer on a light fixture. However, after 6 months of resistance training, the muscle gene patterns related to the mitochondria shifted to a more youthful state. In other words, strength training made the older mitochondria behave more like younger, healthier mitochondria. And it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, obviously the older people were weaker than the younger people. They were 59% weaker at the start of the study. However, after 6 months of resistance training, they were only 38% weaker than their younger counterparts. And any way you slice it, that's going to translate into a better quality of life. So this study confirmed that mitochondrial failure occurs with aging and that resistance training reversed many of the molecular signs of aging, especially in genes tied to mitochondrial energy production. Number 2, Zone 2 training. So if you're like many people, you're probably saying, what the heck is Zone 2 training? Well, I look at it as the new sexy way to define moderate intensity exercise. And while I personally tend to think of Zone 2 training as more the stuff of internet influencers, general rule of thumb, Zone 2 training is around 60 to 75% of your maximum heart rate. Basically, you can talk during exercise, but you're breathing deeper than you normally would, and you can hold that exercise intensity anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. Now, having said all that, in this review, it stated that working out at a Zone 2 training intensity, easy to moderate, is a strong stimulus for improving how well your mitochondria make energy. In this study, 10 healthy men and women performed either 4 weeks of bike interval training or moderate continuous exercise that was equal to about 50% of their maximum leg muscle power. Results: compared to at the start of the investigation, moderate continuous exercise training showed a significant increase in an enzyme called citrate synthase, which is an indicator of greater mitochondrial content in those muscle fibers. They didn't see this improvement, however, in the legs that did the interval training. And when they looked at things under the microscope, they found that continuous exercise, Zone 2 training, also resulted in more mitochondria being packed inside those skeletal muscle fibers. In a nutshell, moderate intensity exercise not only increased mitochondrial enzymes, it also increased proteins that were associated with the mitochondria, and they led to an increase in the number of mitochondria too. Number 3 is the Mediterranean diet. Probably. And I say probably because the rationale makes sense. The Mediterranean diet is rich in several nutrients that have been shown to not only support mitochondria electron transport chain function, but also mitochondrial biogenesis that helps lower inflammation and battles oxidative stress too. In this study, people with fatty liver disease were put on a 1-year-long Mediterranean diet eating program. Results: no surprise, people with fatty liver disease started with weak working mitochondria in their blood cells. But after they improved their Mediterranean diet score, their mitochondria began to work normal again. Next up, treating metabolic health problems sooner rather than later. In this investigation, 10 people with type 2 diabetes undertook a weight loss and exercise program for 5 months with the goal of reducing their body weight by at least 7%. Results: to paraphrase the researchers, The participants of this study made a lot more mitochondria, 67% more, and those mitochondria also had more of a special membrane lipid called cardiolipin, which is needed for energy production. Energy-producing enzymes also became more active, which is more proof that those mitochondria began to work better. And as those mitochondria began to work better, their blood sugar control improved as well. The people with the best results also showed the greatest reductions in blood sugar and A1C. Number 5 may be the hardest of all to do, and that's calorie restriction. Here's a study involving 36 healthy overweight people who took part in this 6-month-long study where they were placed into one of 3 groups. There's a control group, a calorie restriction group, where they cut out about 25% of their calories daily, and there's also a calorie restriction and exercise group. Results indicated that both the calorie restriction alone and calorie restriction plus exercise improved mitochondrial function and increased the expression of genes involved in mitochondrial biogenesis. And as an added bonus, eating fewer calories also reduced oxidative stress as well. Now that's good news, but be aware that not all studies show that calorie restriction works. For example, there's this 1-year-long investigation involving healthy but not overweight people, which revealed no beneficial effects on mitochondrial function or mitochondrial biogenesis. Bottom line, I would like to see a few more studies on this, but if we take these investigations at face value, it may indicate that whether or not calorie restriction works depends on whether someone is overweight and what their health problems might be. And number 6 is sleep, and I'm going to give this one an honorable mention. And that's because in mice, sleep deprivation has been shown to reduce how well the mitochondria generate energy. And in this study, which involved over 200 healthy middle-aged adults, poor sleep quality was associated with worse mitochondrial function. And there's also some evidence suggesting that people with poor sleep, for example, sleep apnea, also tend to have poor functioning mitochondria. All of that research is intriguing, but none of it is what I would call the smoking gun. That said, if I were betting, I would say, yeah, poor sleep probably is associated with poor mitochondrial functioning. I would just like to see a few more studies on it. So did I miss any? Leave a comment below and let me know, and I'll see you in the next video.